Welcome back to Reddit are us. What? You know what? Just to be safe, moment ended up saving your butt. Story 1. I was delivering pizza in a sketchy block of town late at night. Huge apartment complex with multiple buildings. Walking up to the front door, I noticed a couple guys wearing dark clothing about 100 feet behind me walking in my direction. Delivery was on the second floor, and by the time I reached her door, I heard the main door of the apartment complex open and close. She used a credit card for the order and tipped in cash, so when I was putting the receipt into my bag, where I kept my cash, I actually pulled the rest of the cash out and stuffed it into my inner jacket pocket just to be safe, leaving just the change I had that night in the bag. Started to head down the stairs back out to my car, and two guys jumped out from behind the stairs, and one had a gun pointed at me. He told me to give them the money. I quickly handed them the bag filled with quarters, and they took off toward the back entrance of the apartment complex. I never ran so fast in my life back to my car. I wanted to make sure I was as far away as possible before they realized they robbed me of $3.50 in quarters. Pizza delivery drivers have dangerous jobs. They're carrying cash and sometimes have to go to sketchy places to drop off, making them an easy target. I think driving Uber is worse though, because you actually have to drive random strangers in your car. I just heard a story the other week where a driver got shot by his passenger and passed away, unfortunately. May he rest in peace. Story 2. I dropped my high school girlfriend off, then for some reason I locked the passenger door. Not even 10 minutes later, I was stopped at a red light and some scummy looking dude tried to open up the door. I have no idea why I locked that door after she got out, since I didn't really have a habit of that. No idea what would have happened if that guy got in my truck. If there's anything I learned from playing Grand Theft Auto, it's that random people will commit Grand Theft Auto if you don't lock your car. Story 3. My dad lost his glasses once. He was going to just use his old prescription, but last minute decided to just go to the optometrist anyway in case something changed. Turns out he had a tear in his retina and was booked for surgery within 24 hours. It was bad enough they said he probably would have gone blind really soon had they not caught it when they did. It's so crazy how a person's life can change in the blink of an eye. Story 4. Snow chains at the bottom of the mountain. A bunch of cars passed me on a clear road on the way up with several warnings all the way up. I saw a local throwing on chains with no snow in the area. I decided to be safe and put them on. 30 minutes later, I was in one of the worst snowing driving conditions I've ever seen. White out conditions in a snowstorm that eventually resulted in the complete shutdown of the roads. I passed car crash after car crash with just enough traction to feel somewhat comfortable moving 15 miles an hour. Anyone heading to Tahoe needs chains and chains that fit. Don't mess around. I don't care if you have 4-wheel drive. Driving through Tahoe and Mammoth during snowstorms is no joke. Literally sunny with no clouds to blinding white darkness in an hour. This sparked a memory from when I was in high school 25 years ago. My boyfriend, his best friend, and my best friend were driving in his Bronco up to Tahoe to ski. It was a 3-hour drive and we had been partying the night before, so I was taking a little nap. I woke up with a panicked feeling and noticed Nick, my boyfriend, wasn't wearing his seatbelt. I just started yelling, "Nick, put on your seatbelt. Nick, please." I started crying. He's like, "Chill. Why are you being crazy?" His friend was like, "Just do it to make her stop." So he did. 30 minutes later, we were singing along to the radio and hit black ice. The Bronco rolled about 3 times and landed upside down and spun. If it wasn't for a giant tree that caught the bumper, we would have slid off the mountain. Nick busted his shoulder. Most of the damage was on the front passenger's side. We all had whiplash and scratches from stuff flying around the car, but otherwise walked away. There is no way Nick would have survived if he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. You would think he would have been a little more grateful, but a month later, I found out he and my best friend were sleeping together because I wasn't ready yet. Story 5. I was getting ready for school while my mom was vomiting in the bathroom. She said it was just a stomach bug and to just go to school, but mentioned her arm hurt. Something didn't sit right, so I called the ambulance from downstairs. They arrived and took her into the ambulance. She then proceeded to have 3 cardiac arrests and needed defibrillation each time. A double bypass later and she was up and about within a month. Paramedics told me she would have passed away 5 minutes after I left if I hadn't called. Such a scary situation. I'm glad OP trusted their gut because it saved their mom's life. Imagine all the guilt OP would have felt if they didn't call for emergency services. Story 6. Normally I'm pretty impressionable and cave to peer pressure, but this one time when I was younger, I was hanging with my friends and a couple of older high school guys I'd only met that day. The girls were all fawning over them, but I could tell they were idiots. When they all wanted to go for a drive with the guys, I thought, nah, I don't trust these guys and I think it's best I just call my parents and go home. I got a call the next morning from one of the girls who was a passenger. One of the high school boys was driving. They'd had a serious crash and one of the girls wasn't wearing her seatbelt and hit her head on the dash and was in a coma for 6 months. She was in intensive care and rehabilitation for years. Still can't believe of all the days I decided not to go with the flow, it probably saved my life. Terribly sad about my friend. We were really close, but she never came right, and her personality changed. I still wonder how successful she might have been, and if we'd still be friends if that hadn't happened to her. Just really sad. Just an unfortunate situation. This is one of the many reasons why wearing a seatbelt at all times should be a must. Story 7. Was watching my toddler nephew and he'd found a metal straw somewhere in the house and started playing with it. He was just tapping stuff and waving it around, but I just read a story on Reddit about a woman who got completely messed up by a metal straw when she fell and it impaled her face. So I took the metal one from my nephew and gave him a soft, squishy silicone one to play with instead. I'm not exaggerating when I say less than 5 minutes later, he fell like toddlers do, and I saw the silicone straw all smushed into his cheek. I had to just sit for a while after that. Shoot, I would have been sitting there for a while too with goosebumps all over my body. That could have been a disaster. It pains me whenever toddlers or babies get hurt because they're so precious and innocent and just learning the ropes of life. Shout out to Reddit for spreading knowledge. Story 8. On a road trip with our dad in Latin America. He lived there and we were visiting. On a highway at night with clouds, no moon, and no lights. This was a new highway that nobody likes taking now, as criminals often leave glass or spikes to puncture tires and rob you, or worse. We were driving and this guy was pulled over and waving for help. My dad stopped behind and the guy was scared and asked if we could light up his car while he changed the flat tire. He was terrified of being out there alone, and rightfully so. Dad goes to get out to help and my sister grabbed him and said she didn't think this felt right. Dad assured us it was fine and almost got out, but sister grabbed him again. Right then, a car flew by the door right where he would have been. 4 guys jump out, one grabs the man, puts a gun to his head, and the others sprint to our car. There was a brief chase down the highway, but luckily their old Corolla didn't keep up with our Jeep, and they gave up after 2 to 3 minutes of driving 170 kilometers an hour. My sister saved my dad's life and probably ours by making him stay in the car that extra few seconds. Edit, the guy with the gun to his head lived and was okay given everything. After the chase, we had to turn around and continue on the way we were originally going, as there were no other routes to get back home. After we passed the vehicle of the man, we saw he wasn't there anymore, and we thought the worst. Luckily, we ended up passing 4 National Guard vehicles about 2 kilometers later and saw that the man was with them, talking to them. I've never known if the guy was in on it. The timing has always seemed off to me. However, the look of fear in his face was so genuine when the guys jumped out that I can remember it perfectly 15 years later. The country in question is Venezuela. The sister's intuition and gut feeling definitely saved her family from a huge mess. I don't think the man was in on it due to the fact that he stuck around to talk to the National Guards. And also, it's pretty hard to fake a genuine look of fear. Story 9. I had a female patient coming for I-131 therapy. Patient must not be pregnant, and to make sure, we do a blood test 1 day prior to dosing. I checked the results on the screen that was negative. I printed it out and put it in the patient file just in case. Although we went paperless years earlier. After giving her radiation safety instructions and discharging her, she came back a couple of days later saying that she was late. The doctor inserted another pregnancy blood test and came out positive. The lab technician went to the previous negative blood test and changed it to positive. Had I not printed the test, it would look like I dosed the patient while pregnant and could get me fired. Staff before this incident used to make fun of me for being paranoid. After this incident, everyone started printing the results. Dang, this is why attention to detail is so important, especially in the healthcare industry. People's health and lives are at stake. It's crazy how easy the lab technician changed the test result that OP had already marked. Luckily, they kept the paper trail to cover their butt. Story 10. Lived in Baltimore at the time. Pulled up outside my place after getting off a late shift and had to get a backpack out of my trunk before going in. I noticed a group of teenage kids hanging out on the corner and thought, nope. Called my roommate to come watch me walk to the door. About 10 minutes later, a girl comes running down the street bleeding, saying she got jumped by the group of kids for no reason. Story 11. Not me, but a coworker. Was trying to separate some railroad ties with a crowbar as part of his yard work for the day, and when it popped, a nail flew and embedded itself in one of the lenses of the safety glasses he threw on. He keeps them on his desk as a reminder. PPE is not just for the workplace, folks. This reminds me of a story I heard where a man was cutting a piece of metal with a circular table saw. He never wore safety goggles, but for some reason, he decided to wear one that day. When he got to work cutting the metal, a piece of scrap metal broke off and flew directly at his face. Luckily, the majority of the scrap piece was blocked by the safety goggles. Had he not been wearing them, he would have lost his eye. Story 12. Saved the GPS location of my vehicle on Google Maps before exploring a national forest with a road trip buddy. We grab some fishing poles and head out toward the nearest water location on our map to hopefully catch a couple fish. Turns out it was a swamp, not a lake, and we got so incredibly turned around it could have ended very badly. We really didn't go that far in from where we parked, but somehow ended up on the other side of the swamp without realizing it. Drizzling rain, mosquitoes, bear tracks, and the sun started going down before we found the car. Without the GPS coordinates saved, it would have been a cold, wet night in the woods at a minimum, and more than likely a search and rescue required situation. Story 13. I worked alone in a gambling/video poker place. Closing. Strange guy came in and started making small talk with me. I was expected to be kind and friendly to everybody who came in, so I was doing that. I decided to send a message to my boyfriend and a friend, and then something in me told me to take a picture of the guy as he moved closer to the counter I was behind. I snuck one real quick and sent it to said friend since she was awake. She called me immediately as she drove the 20 minutes to my job an hour before I got off. I'll add, I didn't drive, so I had no vehicle in the now abandoned parking lot. The only car being his, which was conveniently backed in right next to the front door. 2 days later, there was a missing persons report released of someone who was a very familiar build and features that I have and suspected trafficking in the area. She went missing later that same night. He left after my friend showed up. I've never had such an uneasy feeling in my life, and I truly think sending those messages are what saved my life. He was waiting for me to get off work at 1 a.m. Our hours were right on the front door. It's so creepy knowing that there are crazy people out there who want to cause harm to others. And to come this close to one and escaping danger is a blessing. Shout out to OP for being alert and also their friend who came as backup. That could have been OP on the missing persons report. Story 14. Not my butt, but my mom's. She and I were home alone, and I was getting ready to go to a party. I came upstairs and found her with the carbon monoxide detector in pieces on the coffee table. She said it was beeping, and apparently once, years ago in our last house, one was malfunctioning and giving a false alarm, so I guess she just assumed it was happening again. I shrugged it off and continued getting ready. I was about to leave, but something was nagging at me. She was insisting it was fine. After some arguing with her, I said, no, we are calling the fire department. So I did. They came, and the levels of carbon monoxide were so high in the basement, they said anyone sleeping down there would be dead already. Our cats were vomiting from the poison and we didn't realize. I guess the filter on the furnace was so clogged, it was pumping out carbon monoxide. One of the firefighters pulled me aside and said if I hadn't called, I likely would have come home to my mom passed away in her bed. Story 15. My friend and his wife were having their first child. They had gotten a big packet of information and paperwork to fill out before the due date to make things easier. There were also brochures for genetic testing and other things that could be done, and one of the things was about saving the cord blood. My friend said that he looked at the front of the brochure and his wife asked if they should do it. It is not cheap. A couple $1,000s to save it and a few hundred a year after that. And my friend said yes. Their daughter was born later that year. 3 years after her birth, they had a boy, and he was born with an immune disorder, no white cells, and his big sister's cord blood and stem cells were used as a treatment. Thanks for watching, and as always, like, comment, and subscribe for more crazy Reddit stories.